perhaps less skilled and less educated. And I would say, talk to people that run businesses and say that when you have an immigrant worker, they want immigration to be legal because these are the people who value these jobs and work very hard, versus teenagers, oftentimes who don't appreciate the minimum wage job. I mean, I think in addition, the language is horrible, whether it's said or not, but the sentiment also needs to be corrected.
All right, I want to go to this. Reporters after MLK Day dedication. Can we take a peek at that? Maybe not.
Mr. President, will you give an apology for the statement yesterday?
Mr. President, did you refer to African Asians? You sort of shit over
Mr. President, are you a racist? Mr. President, will you respond to these serious questions about your statement, sir?
No, Mr. President,
You're talking to the President, not you, sir. Mr. President, are you a racist?
Katie, you and I have been in scrums like that on different occasions, and, people shout all sorts of things out, and they're wild microphones, and you could hear much of what they were saying at and to the president.
Yeah, the questions of, are you a racist? Did you say the word that we're not going to say here on the air? Yeah. The thing for me is there is a distinction between the people who live in a country and the governments that run it. Yahoo News interviewed a 30-year-old sociologist from Guinea, and she actually agrees with the president and ran through a whole long list of African countries that are corrupt in the way that they treat women and the societies that they run there. That being said, the president has to realize that these kinds of comments detract away from what he's trying to get done. Earlier this week, he had a phenomenal meeting with bipartisan support for the first time in a year since he got inaugurated in January. They were praising him publicly on microphones outside the White House to the media. Yeah. And here we are now just pulling all of that back as if it didn't happen. And so he has to realize that, yes, he says things in a very candid way. Some of it might be true, some might not be true, but it does serve as a distraction to his agenda and what his goals are.
Well, and I don't know how genuine, Juan, to further Katie's point, Democrats were when they said, oh, we could be close to getting a deal. I don't know how many of them would have eventually jumped on board. But this is a distraction. And, I would question, and I hear you on private. I did not hear anybody say off the record, but I hear you on a private meeting. Right. The complicating fact for me in that meeting is how lowbrow were the arguments such that these words were needed to make the argument?
Well, let's go back, because what the reporting indicates is that they were having a conversation about this lottery, this diversity lottery.
The visa lottery.
And so what happens in that lottery, Harris, is that the U.S. government has determined that there are certain countries that are underrepresented in terms of the immigrant flow into the United States, legal immigrant flow. And in order to make sure that people from these less represented countries had an opportunity, they then started this lottery program. At that point, President Trump was saying he wants to cut that program. He really wants to eliminate, I think, but he says he's willing to cut it in half. And they were talking about, okay, if we're going to cut it in half, let's make sure that we have a special program to make sure that people from distressed countries, and here they were talking about African, Haitian, El Salvador.
Mostly countries of people of color.
Yes, and the president then apparently responded with this vulgarity, saying, why do we need people from those blank countries? Again, speaking to what Melissa pointed out, there's a difference between the countries and corrupt government. That was Katie's point.
Actually, Katie said that.
No, and Melissa said we need to speak to the spirit of the comment, which is, gosh.
Answer the question that he had.
Yeah, because it should be so obvious. You know what, Mr. President, your family immigrated to this country. At that time, people spoke in those negative terms about,
that's true,
other parts of the world. And now you talk about this and the heavy load of the racial part, people from those countries being people of color, unlike people from Norway.
Indentured servants from Ireland.
Right. That's right.
Yes.
And who first went through the Caribbean, Barbados, where I was just a few weeks ago. The community, the Irish community, very proud, but they came as indentured servants and settled there. And some came to the upper northeast part of this country as well. And where would we be if we didn't have these immigrants?
I wouldn't be here.
My
family is of Irish descent.
And my husband's of Irish descent. And people who are from Ireland, just look out here on St. Patrick's Day, whose parents came, they're still very proud. So you can understand why Mia Love and other people felt very offended by the comment he made. That said, I still don't in my heart believe the president's a racist. I think he's just an old guy who says things in a very impolitic way. And I think that sometimes not being a politician has benefited him. This would have been a day where being a politician would have benefited him, because I think he says things in ways that just give more grist to the mill for
But
his...
does it affect the policy?
It does. And I just talked to my husband about this. And
we had a great conversation. Can we share a little bit of that green room conversation?
Yeah, and Sean said, look, we were in a better place at the beginning of the week to get a deal.
Right.
On
There you go.
2
days ago you were in a better place.
That's the
than
real
we
point.
are right now. And I'll tell you what, this is now being fought on the terms that the Democrats like, which is identity politics and the racialization of immigration and border security.
Wait a second. Who brought identity politics into this, Rachel? I think it was the president, not the Democrats.
I would argue the Democrats who walked out of that room and decided to repeat those words that were said, those incendiary remarks.
Why did he say it then?
And Democrats
No, I'm not saying origin of the comment. You're asking me origin of the politics. And origin of the politics to me happens when you leave a private meeting and you don't share a transcript, which is very different than sharing just certain comments and remarks. The origin of the remarks, the president. The origin of the politics, the Democrats.
Agreed.
So then I ask the question again, because nobody answered. I'll go to you with it. What is incumbent upon the Republicans in that room to do at this point? Anything?
I don't know. I mean, I almost think that you have to come. I think you have to be honest about what you think you heard and what you heard.
You do.
I do. I mean, we can't be in a place where we're lying about anything. I mean, we've got to come forward, talk about what happened, talk about how to fix it. I mean, like I said, answer the actual question of why it is valuable to have people from these countries. Because they make this a country. They appreciate being here. They work really hard. This is what our country is all about, taking people who are in horrible circumstances and giving them and their families the chance for something better. I think underneath that point is this idea that it is difficult to get people immigrating from a country that has a failed government, and he's maybe confusing those topics where it's tough to vet people in terms of terror, but that's not what this with Haiti is about.
So when I say I agree with you as a journalist, I'm in favor of more words, not fewer. So bringing forth whatever we know now that everything is leaked is helpful to maybe get us to that next point of talking. I mean, look at the kind of conversation you can have, and maybe they can get back to the point where they can do a deal. I don't know. January 19th, though, government spending deadline. And this will be part of that conversation, no doubt. Democrats and Republicans at odds over how to move forward with congressional investigations on Russia now. Democrats reportedly want to hear from dozens of additional witnesses. We will talk about how long these investigations should go on and on and on. And House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is facing some backlash after some controversial remarks she made about the bipartisan group of lawmakers negotiating an immigration reform. Race came up out of her mouth. What she said that even has some members of her own political party firing back. Stay close.
The very idea that this week they're saying, oh, why don't we get 4 white guys and General Kelly to come and do this?
All right. It's in the congressional investigations into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon reportedly set to appear before the House Intelligence Committee next week. Mr. Bannon made headlines for his comments in a new book calling that meeting at Trump Tower during the 2016 campaign treasonous. The top Democrat on the committee reportedly wants Bannon, as well as dozens of other witnesses, to testify. His wish list reportedly includes Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski is also expected to appear as early as next week. He reportedly said he will not plead the Fifth. Meanwhile, in the Senate Intelligence Committee, Chairman Richard Burr saying he sees no reason to ask Steve Bannon to appear before the committee. Katie, what do you think?
I think it's interesting he's saying he doesn't want him to appear before the committee, because we've heard the opposite from Democrats. And based on what Steve Bannon said in this book and in interviews about, it wasn't just about slamming President Trump's family and that being a personal insult. It was the fact that he essentially implicated President Trump in the Russia scandal by saying he knew about the meeting that Don Jr. had at Trump Tower, which is something that the White House and the campaign has denied. So in terms of where this goes, we've heard both that it's wrapping up and that we don't know how long it's going to go. If this is the witness list, I think that we're going to be talking about this for a little while longer.
Yeah.
So when we look at the Russia probe, you see the Democrats want to talk about Trump and collusion, but the Republicans want to talk about Hillary and collusion. And so I think we should look at both of them. If we're going to look at Trump and we're going to have all these witnesses, that's fine. Then let's keep talking about the emails. Let's keep talking about the speech that Bill Clinton gave. Let's keep talking about Uranium One and emails that probably the Russians saw from her server. And let's just keep going. If that's what the Democrats want to do, fine. But what I don't like is to see a politicization of the Russia topic. If there's a Russia probe, let's look at, and Russia interfered with our elections, okay, let's look at what happened on both sides. And to me, I think, you know, part of the reason why you see Bannon and even Lewandowski saying, go ahead, talk to me, I don't think there's any collusion there, because if there was, with all the leaks we've had, we would have known by now.
It seems clear to me that Russia's attempted to get its fingers into absolutely everything that's going on. It is curious why we investigate one side and not the other, or is it possible to look at all of these various things? And I'm never satisfied when we have these hearings anyway, because it doesn't seem like we make any progress. People kind of grandstand, they say things, you feel like you learned something, then nothing ever comes of it. Even if you feel like you heard somebody said something that incriminated them, then there's no follow-up. I don't know, is it frustrating to you?
Well, I think what's frustrating is understanding the impact, you know, when the Trump folks go on the offensive and they attack the credibility of law enforcement, attack the FBI, attack Robert Mueller, say that Jeff Sessions, their own attorney general, isn't doing enough. You know, I think the president said this week he wants Republicans to take control of the Russia investigation. I mean, it looks like it's the people who are conducting the Russia investigation are just simply seeking to undermine him, and that it's all political, you know, going back to what Rachel was talking about. To the contrary, what we've seen is a steady progression by Robert Mueller's special counsel. We've seen people indicted. We see now Bannon making these statements about not only treason, but suggesting that there's money laundering involved in the rest. And we see that the special counsel says that he is making steady progress. So to me, it's like, you know what, the impact of all the Trump people saying, oh, it's not Trump, don't look for anything here. It's look the other way. Look at the Clintons. Is really having impact, and it confuses people.
Well, if I could, I mean, we can actually do three things at once.
Sure.
You can look at the current investigation and the Trump side of it. You can look at the next investigation and the Clinton side of it. Yeah. But the criticism about law enforcement, I want that to be looked at too from this vein. Was there bias at the FBI? Was there bias at the DOJ? I want them to look at those men, and in the case of the FBI, men and one woman, and the text messages that were exchanged. Take a look at that, and was there any furthering of that mentality there? And what was the insurance policy that Peter Strzok and this woman said that they, you know, agreed upon to keep the president out of the White House? Let me finish. I didn't talk when you talked.
No.
Hold on one second. So I want all of that to be looked at from the standpoint that America deserves to have its trust renewed in these agencies that are tasked with not only keeping us informed, but keeping us safe.
So I think you must remember the Democrats complained when Jim Comey came out with his statement about Hillary Clinton, not indicting her.
I do, but when it was time to fire him, then they were disingenuous and keep him in office.
I don't think so. No. I think people were still critical of him. They said this is the president of the United States who's exercising his power to fire somebody who had a contrary view of what was going on with the Russians. But the key point here is what we're talking about with the Clintons or the questions about text messages from FBI agents doesn't match the magnitude of the threat posed by the Russians interfering in our politics.
But it does speak to the issue of uranium. And the issue of them being able to do their jobs without bias, I think, is important. And that's not to impugn all the thousands of people who work there. But if we're investigating, let's look at the ones that we know were perhaps tipping more than toe into the bias end of things.
All right. The immigration debate raging on, just in case you haven't noticed. Now President Trump slamming a bipartisan deal proposed by Senate lawmakers, what this means going forward, and whether Democrats will force a government shutdown if Congress fails to strike a deal in 1 week. Plus, Nancy Pelosi's controversial comment on the group working on that deal. Did she cross a line? We're going to debate that next.
Fox News alert, at least one bipartisan group of senators is going back to the drawing board after President Trump slammed their proposal to provide protections for Dreamers and to reform parts of the immigration system. The president tweeted this: the so-called bipartisan DACA deal presented yesterday to myself and a group of Republican senators and congressmen was a big step backward. Wall was not properly funded. Chain and lottery were made worse, and the U.S. would be forced to take large numbers of people from high crime countries which are doing badly. And this, because of the Democrats not being interested in life and safety, DACA has now taken a big step backwards. The Dems will threaten shutdown, but what they are really doing is shutting down our military at a time when we need it most. Get smart, make America great again. That's not the only immigration deal in the works, though. There are other groups in the House and Senate trying to come up with an agreement as well. But where does this leave us? So you had that one, Rachel, the four congressmen and one woman who came up with the House version of this, led by Bob Goodlatte. So you've got that out there, and then you've got these ideas on the Senate side, which the president says he doesn't like.
Right, and the people who were in his office yesterday when he made this, unfortunate comment, and he was upset about the deal they put forward. I mean, let's remember, these are not leadership-appointed groups of senators. These are self-appointed groups, and I talked to several people in the House, and nobody liked that deal either. The president said no deal, and these congressmen were going to say no deal. I hope we get a deal, but I will say that we were better off getting a deal earlier in the week than we are right now.
So let me ask this, because when you watch that really remarkable 55-minute live inside look.
It's amazing.
It was really, really interesting earlier this week, and you got to see Democrats and Republicans. I remember at one point, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Dianne Feinstein of California who said, can we talk about a clean DACA bill and separate that out from the spending bill? Now remember, Democrat putting that on the table, the president said, well, we can talk about that. So why not try to get it done that way and keep the government open as of next Friday?
Well, because remember, Kevin McCarthy stepped in at just that moment, Harris, and said, Mr. President, slow down. That's not to our advantage on the Republican side.
Well, he wanted the wall to come back into play and a few other things, too.
So we got to tie everything in.
But he didn't say it couldn't happen without certain other things on board. Katie?
Feinstein was making the argument not necessarily to take it out of the spending bill, because that would take away the leverage from Democrats in this situation. She was saying she wanted a clean DACA bill away from the other requirements that the White House and Republicans want, meaning chain migration ending, visa lottery program ending, and the wall. That's what she meant by
those things in the tweet.
Like she just wanted the DACA program to be fixed. But this was the first bite at the apple for the framework of getting something on the table. However, they don't have a lot of time because Democrats have decided to tie it to the spending bill, and they're going to have to make the decision about whether they're going to put DACA recipients or the U.S. military first. And I think Americans know exactly which one they should prioritize.
But that's a false choice, because then who wouldn't support our military? So you put us in a box. But what I'm saying is,
because they're putting themselves in a box by putting it at this deadline. Democrats were asking for it to be tied to the spending bill.
The president has said that he really wants to support the Dreamers, and he said, the plan was supposed to end in March. He created an artificial crisis when he undid it in the fall and said,
Obama
we've
created
got
an
to deal
artificial crisis.
A couple things, because I want to bring you into the conversation on this, Melissa. A couple things. So the judge recently ruled from the Ninth Circuit that, he's going to take a relook at this, and he's going to keep the program for Dreamers in place, defying what the White House had wanted. He's going to keep it in place until either Congress comes up with a solution or he looks at it, which, and looking at his docket, that would be as far along as June. So there is a little bit more time to deal with this. Democrats are not being genuine rather, when they say it has to be done right now, because that judge created some space.
There is more time to deal with it, but the problem is it's actually not nice to people to continue having this out here and expiring and going on. Like when you talk about continuing it and he's so mean to rip it away, it's mean to not come up with a permanent solution as to what we're actually going to do. I mean, rather than politicking, it would be so nice if people could sit down like adults, which is what that room looked like. I mean, to me, that's what makes me want to cry, is that when you watch that room, Democrats were working, everybody was working.
The 55-minute live meeting.
I sincerely believe, having watched the whole thing live and organically as it was happening, which is different from watching it with everybody's spin, watching it organically as I was happening, I felt like it was dawning on everyone that they could actually get something done. And that they could put politics aside and be like, you know what, the truth is, I could live with this and this if I could have this. Where in politics you have to say, there's no way I'm going to let that happen.
Katie, do you think the camera makes people act better?
Absolutely.
I mean, when the president said on Twitter that what do I need to do? Have everything recorded at this point?
Yeah.
You know, does
Maybe
that
he should.
does that have everybody dial
It
up their
does,
better
because
angels?
you know what it does? It makes sure that there is accountability. When there's accountability for what people say and what their actions are, they tend to speak a little more civilly because they know there will be
Y'all
consequences
tease
for what they
me. Y'all
say.
tease me, but that's why I like C-SPAN.
It can
That's
cause
true. We
misunderstanding.
all like C-SPAN.
I
But
know, we
you
have those
remember, it
hearings
was
sometimes.
Republicans who were flipping out at what he said in that meeting.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
No,
the
I think
question
he
is,
misunderstood what
well,
she said.
I don't know if he
I think
understood.
he
You
misunderstood.
didn't get what I
He
meant.
always
Anyway.
wants the wall.
Well, anyway,
Well,
moving along.
But I would say one last thing on this point before I know we want to move along is that did he mean a wall literally from the Democrats' perspective, or did he mean it as a rhetorical
he said
device
wall
he used
system.
during the
A wall
campaign?
system.
Well, system,
Because-
meaning you put a fence line wall in where it makes sense. You don't
Well,
put it.
but
You
I'm
can't
saying-
put it. You
but-
can't put it in the middle of a
speaking-
river.
and
And we're going
speaking
to put
to
a wall
Melissa's
on
point-
this
all right.
topic,
No, but then the point
and we're going to
becomes-
move right along.
Okay, we got
okay.
That was a big shift, Juan. You're right.
So going forward, it went over like a lead balloon. Nancy Pelosi's dig aimed at a group of lawmakers negotiating an immigration deal. And even when fellow Democrats are upset about it, you know it's a problem. Here's the remarks that kicked off the controversy.
5 white guys, I call them, you know. I thought you're going to open a hamburger stand next or what? That could have been done 4 months ago. The very idea that this week they're saying, oh, why don't we get 4 white guys and General Kelly to come and do this? You have to understand, in our caucus, we are blessed with great diversity. To ignore all of that and say, well, 4 of us are going to go in a room with General Kelly and we're going to come up with something. Well, they could have done that 4 months ago.
Well, that getting an immediate pushback from Pelosi's number 2, Steny Hoyer. He says in a statement obtained by Politico, quote, that comment is offensive. I am committed to ensuring Dreamers are protected, and I will welcome everyone to the table who wants to get this done. Pelosi's office releasing a statement appearing to walk back from the controversy, saying, quote, it's not a question of who's there, but who's not there. Juan, how do Nancy Pelosi's comments move the ball forward in terms of any kind of deal on DACA, which are people that Democrats claim to care about?
Oh, I think that, remember, that's so important for the members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to feel like they have some input into these negotiations. And so I think they've been pressuring Pelosi to say, hey, how come you have a group of only white men in the meeting, in her case represented by Hoyer? So Hoyer's right to say, hey, if it's about my whiteness, that's offensive because I really care about this issue.
Right.
But in terms
talking DACA and Dreamers, and they were young people in the audience with their phones calling her a liar and bum rushing the lectern where she was speaking from. It isn't that, you know, diverse audiences haven't been sought out or talked to by this particular Democrat, but they are hostile toward her because they don't think that she really has their back.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't believe that when it comes to either the Dreamers or even comprehensive immigration reform, what I see is that I don't think the Democrats want a deal. I think they love having this club to hit Republicans with. And I think their biggest fear was what happened earlier in the week, which is why I'm upset that the president stepped on this, is that earlier in the week, I think he had the conversation where it should be about border security and a solution for the Dreamers. And guess what? He even alluded to potentially solving comprehensive immigration reform, which would have taken immigration off the table, which was negative for the Democrats.
I know we have to go. I have to say something really quick. It's really offensive when anyone says 4 white guys, 5 white guys. You don't get to flip it around and do it that way as well. It doesn't mean just because those men are white that they can't represent, that they haven't talked to, and they can't represent the needs of others. I don't like it. I mean, now in this era, I was writing a recommendation for someone the other day who was a woman and said at a time when we're putting women forward, that is not why you should promote this person. She's the most qualified person. I don't like this as we sit here and put labels on people.
All right, well, we are awaiting President Trump's decision on the Iran nuclear deal. Sources tell Fox News he will likely continue decertification, but keep sanction waivers in place, whether he needs to get tougher.
House Speaker Paul Ryan right now is at a live event in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Moments ago, he was asked about the president's controversial remarks. Here's what the speaker had to say.
Yeah, I read those comments later last night. So first thing that came to my mind was very unfortunate, unhelpful. But you know what I thought of right away?
You know, it's interesting. Rachel was just saying this is what politicians are going to have to talk about inside the GOP today.
Yeah. Instead of talking about 44-year low unemployment, record job numbers for Hispanics, renaissance in manufacturing, stock market. I mean, this economy is absolutely booming, and we have to talk about this. This is the problem.
Yeah.
All right. Katie?
Frustrating. All right, well, Fox News alert. We are awaiting a decision from President Trump on the Iranian nuclear deal. Sources telling Fox News he is likely to continue decertification of the deal and that he is also likely to reluctantly continue sanctions waivers while imposing new sanctions on the government that are separate from the nuclear deal. Here's White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders on the ongoing review process.
The president still strongly believes this is one of the worst deals of all time. And one of the single greatest flaws is that its restrictions leave Iran free in the future to openly develop their nuclear program and rapidly achieve a nuclear weapons breakout capability. Obviously, we see big problems with that. The administration is continuing to work with Congress and with our allies to address those flaws, and we'll keep you guys posted.
Melissa, the administration's in a tough place. Yeah. They seem to want to impose more sanctions. Can you tell us what that means for business in Iran?
I mean, what's so interesting is I heard a really good reporter on our network breaking it down this morning and saying that by staying in the deal and continuing to waive the sanctions that are within the deal, that then the president can just step outside the deal and impose all kinds of other sanctions on Iran, which makes me wonder if this deal is even more stupid than I thought in the first place. I mean, how is that possible? I mean, it has felt meaningless because it has felt like everybody came together on a deal. You know, Europe thought they were going to rush into the country and make a fortune, and their economies were sagging. They were excited to sell iPhones and Diet Coke to folks in there. That hasn't happened. You know, they were going to slow down the nuclear program. Doesn't seem like that's happened. Nothing has been advanced. We haven't gotten any leverage. Things aren't better. But then also, we're not imposing sanctions, but we can step right outside and impose different sanctions. It seems like it's all nonsense.
One thing has happened for sure, and that's all the money that they got in this deal. And the people in the streets of Iran saying that that money has been used outside of the things that they say they need. I mean, they want a booming economy and millions of dollars. And we knew potentially from former Secretary John Kerry that they would take that money and pump it into, you know, the tributaries of terrorism. So the people on the ground are telling us how faulty that deal was also from their perspective.
Well, and based on Iran's behavior since nuclear deal was signed, whether it's buzzing our ships in the Persian Gulf or whether it's, you know, not giving the money that we sent back to them to the people and instead funneling it to terrorist organizations in Yemen, for example, who are shooting rockets and missiles at civilian airports. I mean, what is the justification for staying in this deal at this point based on Iran's behavior?
Well, I think the key point is it was supposed to limit their ability to develop nuclear weapons that they would use against Israel. So we had a strong interest in that, and I would expand that into the whole Middle East region, Kate. But so now you have a situation where people are saying, if you impose these sanctions, you're changing the deal. And what that means is less consequential.
But has Iran
for the
not changed the deal through their behavior?
Well, but what I'm saying to you is the Europeans, Western Europeans, but even some in the UN Security Council and others have said, we want this deal because we want to take away the power to develop nuclear weapons from Iran. We can have arguments about sanctions and what the money got used for, but we should not lose focus on what we're doing. That's the problem.
Rachel, the argument from the administration is we don't have evidence necessarily that they violated the nuclear agreement, but we do believe that they have violated the spirit of the deal, and all of the behavior around the deal is what we're trying to combat here.
Right. Look, they're still building ballistic missiles. They're still funding terrorism. They're committing human rights abuses against their own people here right now. So I don't think anything has changed in Iran's behavior since we, passed these sanctions. So, I mean, I know the president ran on we're going to end this agreement. I don't think the American people care whether we stay in the agreement or add more sanctions.
It doesn't seem to do anything.
It doesn't seem to matter. And what I think people want is for them to stop threatening Israel and to stop building nuclear weapons. And I think that we should be doing some things to help the protesters and give support.
Which have been forgotten a little bit.
All right.
Absolutely.
A new study finds the mainstream media devoting wall-to-wall coverage to the anti-Trump book while downplaying stories like the new Clinton Foundation probe. Wait till you see how the media coverage broke down. That's next.